Yep. Mouse gotta go with computer.
Here we go. Student, so I still beat up from being drugged everywhere.
I've had an Apple for the last like 10 years as my computer for
Great at computers?
went with one just like this.
What's the password for
Is he
Just
gonna
so
get
I'm
up?
liking it, but
I don't know what
really
his
like that.
for
password
Tiger
is.
Guess?
Oh, he has to create his own.
No, for Tiger Guess or internet.
Yep, he creates his own.
For the internet?
Mm-hmm.
You create your own?
You do. It's new.
You're in?
A year ago.
Okay.
Is that?
I'll call the meeting to order. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Have to flip that back.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So was the carpet redone again or what?
They shampoo.
Oh.
Clean.
Mr. Mosel, will you read our mission statement?
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I'll need a motion.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion by Jeff and seconded by Bill Mosel to approve the agenda. Any corrections or additions? I'll call for the vote.
You vote Sarah?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
The agenda.
Yep, got it.
And the agenda is approved. Public forum. Anybody from the public like to approach the board? This is your time. Next item is presentation, our community survey analysis.
I'll go ahead and present from here. I just want to share, we did a survey with the public. It was completed in February, so it's been a few months. This survey, we asked a number of different questions, and the feedback has been really helpful to us just thinking about planning going forward. A lot around communications ended up being a lot where the conversation came back in. We looked at how well we're connecting with our community, and we talked about the referendum that was failed, the operating referendum that was failed last fall. So we looked at the why behind that and just thinking about how that might help us to move forward. So since then, I've shared this presentation or this information with executive committee, and I want to share with the full board and the community this afternoon just some feedback that we received from that survey and how we're using that to go forward. Some information from that. I do want to share, and this information that's compiled in this survey that I'm sharing, this was compiled by RAP Strategies. That was the communications consulting firm that we've been working with. They helped put the survey together. They actually compiled the results, and they put this presentation together for us. So they presented back to us and have helped process some of the feedback and some of the input we got from the community when it was finished. And then they are also doing some ongoing training I'll talk about at the end of this presentation. One of the things that we just wanted to say is that I'll get into kind of who responded to the survey here, but one of the things they point out, first of all, this is not a best representation of the whole community. Just when we look at the results that we got, we had a really nice percentage of people responding, a lot of responses, but it wasn't a well representative of our entire community. So we recognize that going into the feedback. Subgroups that responded, overall we had 391 responses. So we were very happy with the number of responses we had. 198 of the responses were parents, 97 were employees. So when we look at that, the parents, that 198, that excludes people who are current or former employees. So if somebody happened to be in two categories, they only are recognized in one category when we looked at the responses here. So the 198 parents, those are just parents, not employees. Current employees, we had a lot of people in that category that responded, includes current and former employees, and both exclude non-residents when we look at the results here. And then the less connected would be people who don't have children in the district, or don't have children who were or are currently students, they have no history of employment, or they're less likely to be impacted by services or standard direct communications that we provide. So good way to look at the different results that we got in the feedback. So one of the questions we asked was about the quality of education perception that's received. And overall, you'll see in the common theme throughout here was there were good results, very positive results in the survey. Overall, there is very positive perception of the services that we provide as a school. So there's rating scales on the left, there's overall, and then it breaks down to the different categories. I'm just going to plan on giving an overview on each slide. I won't spend a lot of time on each slide, I want to talk more about the overall kind of the impact pieces, but if you guys have questions as I go through, please feel free to stop me and ask me questions as we look at these two. The next slide looks at quality of specific services. So the first one's overall quality of education. Looking at specific services, we asked people to rank within each of these different pieces that we do. And then we talked about desire for where maybe some improvement could be made. So the kind of the bottom ones, we're looking at some room for improvement. Certainly we see desire for increased CTE education, career and technical prep, SEL services. It was, for me, exciting to see those things. Those are all things that we've been talking about. Our strategic plan talks about those things as focuses for next year. For the next coming years, we've put a lot of time into starting to build some work around those. So we'll see with the new CTI center opening this fall and increased SEL staffing at all the buildings, those are all things we put some time into. So those ones that are rated lower are things that we have already been focused on. So that tells me the community is seeing the same things and the same areas for growth as what we've identified. Measures of trust and understanding is the next slide. This was another question that we asked, related to a variety of different areas about within the buildings. We see strong support for staff. What I do see in here is a call that we could add better communications around our goals, around planning, around finance, and with all stakeholders. So looking at the resident parents, the people that aren't directly tied to the school, the unsure numbers, those are circled there, just kind of highlight where those are. Those were numbers where I see that we could do a better job communicating. When we talked with the communications people we're working with, the unsure isn't bad, it just isn't necessarily good either. It means that we can do a better job to help people understand where we're at with those things. So that leads into some of when I get to the end, some of the next steps that we talked about is how can we do that better so people know how they feel about those. We don't want as many in the unsure category. Looking at trust with communications, another thing we asked is how people want to receive information. So when I look at the different sources that were identified, the platforms that people prefer to use, email, newspaper, social media were the top three. Those are the top three that we use. So what that tells us is that we're using some of the right resources, if right is the correct word there, maybe we can use those in a different manner. We can use a better way of communicating or making sure that we're telling the message to all stakeholders, that we're sharing that out. You look across the different groups, they might be in a different order, but it's really the same things are standing out. Newsletters, emails, newspapers, social medias, those are all communication sources that we use as our primary sources. And those are all things that we're going to work on for next year, some goals and some steps tied to the strategic plan. Then we went to some questions about the bond referendum. So this goes back to the 2019 bond referendum, and we asked about attitudes toward that. So looking at satisfaction levels with that, there was a high satisfaction rate with how we've used the proceeds from that 2019 referendum. So if you recall, that was the safety and security measures and the new Southview Elementary School. Overall, the community has expressed high level of satisfaction with that bond referendum. Looking at the operating levy referendum, so we asked if you voted yes or if you voted no. Really, we're looking at why did that not pass? And there were a number of different areas there. The open-ended ones where people could put an open-ended response to it, but the high tax impact was a common theme we heard. Didn't prioritize the right things. Is looking at how we were going to spend the money. A small number of people said they didn't understand the plan, so it tells me the communication was out there, but didn't necessarily feel the level we were asking for funding was correct. And the open-ended responses said very similar things. So the tax impact and looking at inflation rates were the biggest reasons that we saw no's according to the survey. The level of trust and referendum votes, looking at people who voted for the 2019 referendum. So do we feel like it was managed correctly afterwards? So just the decision-making, financial management, and vision for the future. We see a high level of trust in the community, even from those who voted no on the original referendum. So saying, yeah, we do feel like, even if they didn't support originally, that the response, the way that was used, they were happy with in the end. So that was positive to see as well. We had a few questions about future referendum, just thinking about some ongoing needs that we know still exist when we think about the operating referendum. That failed. This year, certainly, as Deanne presented the budget and you guys approved a budget last month, we talked about we're in a good spot for this year, but we also know that we've got money drying up and we know we're going to have some ongoing operating needs. just thinking about what might that look like or how might we address that in the future. So these numbers I think were really interesting too. We had 27% of the survey respondents said no matter what we ask for, they're probably going to be a no vote. We had 50% of people said they'd possibly support depending on the goals and affordability, so needing to make sure we communicate that. And there were about 22% people said, doesn't matter what you ask for, we believe in our schools and we're going to vote yes. So that, and then that varies out by the different groups, but I think those were interesting numbers to think about with that as well. So some things to consider, and certainly we'll bring to Finance Committee as we think about going forward and how might that look going forward. One of the questions we asked was specifically about how tax dollars should be distributed, how that impact should be distributed. This 80% saying that it should be spread across different property types versus 18% primarily among homeowners and businesses. So the reason that was asked is we had asked for an operating levy this last fall, and another option is a capital projects levy where that distributes that money differently. The way it's asked for is differently, is distributing more evenly across many different property types. And that's one of the things that the Finance Committee and we've talked about before as an option to look at. You look at a lower dollar amount, you spread over more people, obviously the overall impact per taxpayer is a lower amount to have a similar impact. It's just you're more restricted in how you can use those funds. So we need to look at where those needs lie, what kind of dollars that might be, and how that might distribute down the road. So we look at all these pieces together, I think kind of help us determine the best way to move forward with that. So then we look at some conclusions, some recommendations. These first slide here is looking at recommendations from RAP Strategies, and they took all the information from the survey. That was a very quick overview of a big survey with lots of questions. What they're recommending in these bullet points, they said look at CTE, behavior management, and SEL. They said the community is saying those things are important, that they feel our district could do a better job with. So those are things that certainly want to consider to think about. They suggest considering a capital projects levy if we do decide to go back forward with another ask in the future. We've talked about that at this point. We don't have a plan to go with anything in the immediate future, but something down the road I do feel we're going to need to continue to think about. Capital projects levy would be a way to, like we just mentioned, distribute that in a broader way, and it just have some very specific funding that certainly could meet some needs that we have, but a lower tax impact to all of our stakeholders. And they said they suggested we review our communications plan. So that's another piece that we've given some thought to. The next couple slides I want to share talk specifically about things that we're looking at after communication with the executive committee and with our admin team. We've talked about some of these things and how we meet more of those needs for the whole community going forward. So one of the first things that we're really going to make a focus on this year, it lines right up with our strategic plan, is focus on that open, transparent communication. I feel like we've done a good job in some areas communicating, and I feel like we can do a better job. We saw that in these results, people saying we're not sure, we're not seeing the information. So us putting out on one source, I think we need to be more and use more variety of sources and be more specific about maybe some things and how we share that out with all stakeholders. So we want to make sure we're telling the story. One of the things we're going to implement this fall is a district-wide parent newsletter. Different buildings have done parent newsletters. We've done one newsletter from the district office each year that comes out prior to school year starting. Be more specific about that. So at board meetings, the second board meeting every month, we have building reports, and I give an overview to you guys. We talk about it in this room. We're going to share some of that information specifically out each month to parents. We'll include some video clips from the board meeting as part of that, is what we've talked about, and just some written ways too, so people can access that in different ways. We'll just take some clips right from this meeting. So Emily's going to help me put some of that together and just have a way to make sure parents have access to the information in another way. Video highlights of updates from sites. So that's some of the things we just talked about. We've also talked a lot about our social media presence. I think a lot of our community, and we know a lot of our community connects via social media to the outside world. That's where we get a lot of information from. I want to make sure that we're using those sources the best we can. So we're looking at some additional social media sources that we haven't used before. Example I'll give is Instagram. We have not used Instagram as a district before. We are going to create a Marshall Public Schools Instagram page that we can share information out. We're adding a school app that will be new this fall. I'm excited to roll that out, where parents can download the app. We'll have information specific to Marshall Public Schools. One click, you can see what activities are going on tonight, where locations those are. You can see the lunch menu. You can see news stories about things taking place. So a very quick source of information for families to access. And then we've completely rebuilt the website. So that's something that kind of came up this summer. We went online with a new website this fall, or this summer already. That's live. We're still putting some final touches. It's not done yet, but I'm really excited how that's coming together. Really working to streamline the information on there, make it easy to access, and make sure the information people need is right there. So that website has been a big part of that. Other things we've talked about is really thinking about the systems of support. So some of those, the behavior management things that come up and such, we've talked about some of that at the board level. Buildings have certainly talked about that. Looking specifically at the middle school, we've talked about bringing bar into the middle school and making sure that's a priority for this year. We think that's important. It lines up with the survey results, lines up with needs that we've seen at the building. So we'll make sure that happens. Help us focus on behavior management, academic support at that level for the middle school kids where we know we have some needs in that way. And I think those pieces are really going to help us meet some of the needs that have been addressed or that came up as identified needs from the community, and will help us be more clear and more transparent with communication to everyone going forward. Another piece I forgot to mention as I was going through that, thinking about that communication, just that streamline, make sure we have information out there. We did hire a communications person. So the admin assistant for the new CTI center, she started this last week. She's been coming in training. Obviously the building's not done, so she's not out there starting CTI just yet. But the communications piece is going to be a big part of that. So she will manage all of our social media, for example. So we can help make sure that messaging is getting out there and we're being consistent with that. There'll be one social media page for the whole district rather than having each site have its own information. I'm sure we have people who are logging in, they're getting information from one site, but not all sites, not getting the whole picture of what's going on in the district. So all those pieces will line together, and then having that communications person help align that will really help us with that work. So
Do you know, will the new app connect or tie to the portal app? Will they?
it's a separate system from the parent portal, but it will have a link to get you in there to make payments and such. It's directly tied to the website.
Okay.
So you've seen some new, our social media posts we've done the last month about have been through the new, through that new portal. We're pushing things out. The app has not gone live yet. We're still building the new app, but it'll be tied directly to all the information going on the website with a link to parent portal, because that's campus, and we don't have some of those options for campus.
Sure.
I think the district app is a great idea.
I think we can
Like
do it.
access for
Yep.
people.
Yeah, we'll make sure people have access to that information that they need or they want to know
Yeah.
without having to dig for it.
Right.
Other questions on the survey? We got some valuable information from that, and we found RAP to be very useful. They will be coming in this fall to do a training with all of our admin assistants and our admin team on how we do that job of telling our story and getting our message out there to everybody. So looking forward to that as well.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks Emily too, and everybody else involved with all this new stuff. So. Our next item is the consent agenda. I'll need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made by Sarah Brink and seconded by Sarah Runcie to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. Just a minute. I've got getting my Sarahs mixed up here. Okay. Now you can vote. And that is approved. Next item is our financials and approval of the bills. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion, Mr. Karen?
Yeah, just a few things to point out. Under our debt service fund, you see a little over 560,000. That's for our June principal and interest payments on our bonds. Just a couple of bills to point out. There's one for AVI Systems. That is the company that put together our PD room, the new screens and the laser projectors, as well as the system to run it, which has worked out very well. We've had a few meetings in here and less fumbling through to get the meetings going, so it was well worth it. Hiller commercial flooring, a little over 100,000. That was part of the carpet project and our flooring project at the high school and middle school. The high school project is completed now. And then just a couple other ones. We have a couple of bills to CDW government. One for $51,000. That's to part of the rotation to replace the middle school staff laptops. That's about 90 laptops. And then there's one for a little over $50,000. That's part of our transitioning smart boards into the interactive TVs. That's to replace 14 of the interactive TVs at Parkside, which we're almost at a complete replacement at Parkside now.
Good. I'll call for the vote. The bills are approved. Next item, treasurer's report. Dion, anything you want to
Yeah,
highlight?
it's just, yeah, thanks, Matt. It's just tricky time of the year because, as you guys know, we still have revenue coming in from the state. They hold 10%, so we'll have some receivables still coming through. But on page 2, you can see right now we're about 1.9 million deficit spending, projecting that we should have over that coming in from the state still. So we should be on track for where we're budgeted or close to even this year.
Very good, thank you. Next item, reports from the board. Any reports or updates?
Just, we're continuing negotiations with teachers union. We haven't met now for a couple of weeks, so we'll get back to that here later this week, hopefully. So, ongoing.
Anybody else? Okay, moving on. Second review of policies 705 to 709, just a discussion item. Any questions? Action items, approval of the Hoffman and Bros fiscal year 2023 audit services.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Bill Swope and seconded by Sarah Brink to approve this. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, our office took a little time on this year. We were presented with a 10% increase from Hoffman and Bropes and ended up contacting some other schools to see where we compare, not only with the base, but also the additional time put into it. And we've negotiated with Hoffman and Bropes with a 0% increase this year and to do a maximum 4,000 not to exceed for any of the additionals. We'll see how this year goes. And then see if we can go back to them again next year, or if we need to do an RFP type just to keep everything. Very happy with Hoffman and Bropes' audit process, familiar with it, and would like to keep on with them. So we're glad they were able to agree with that 0% increase.
Very good. I'll call for the vote. That is approved. Your next action item is approval of the 10-year long-term facility maintenance plan resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Bill Molso and seconded by Jeff to approve the 10-year facilities plan.
Yeah,
Go
just
through it.
there's a lot of documents out there. We're not going to go through each one, but as we our facility committee met and as we went through some of this community survey, a lot's talked about transparency and getting some of the information out there. And as we've talked about several times since 2019 and the referendum passed, a lot of what the community wanted is to make sure that we're taking care of our buildings. And so put a list together. I didn't do anything from 2022, which involved things like the track and a lot of projects, but I put what projects we're working on this summer, as well as some of the future projects, and then also a summary of, and of course, you go 10 years out, this is all just projected, but of where we are. We've talked in the past. There's no reason for us to have $1.2 million in a fund balance for our LTFM if there's projects that need to be done. But we also want to be responsible that we don't spend it down too far. So if something comes up, and I'll give you an example, like our smoke damper over the theater needed to be replaced, it was about $120,000. So you don't want to spend down too much where if those projects come up, all of a sudden we're in a spot. But you can kind of see where we're sitting up and down through the next 10 years. Again, a lot of things being done this summer, a lot of things needed. We'll go through the high school is getting a carpet replacement. Why is the new high school getting a carpet replacement? Because it's 18 years old and it needed it. So our middle school is getting a much needed flooring tile replaced in the cafeteria and some classrooms. They had the carpet replacement last year. So we're doing everything we can to keep everything updated. Middle school gym, hopefully a lot of the community can see the change there. We refinished the floor, repainted the floor, painted the walls, put up new banners, new lighting, new HVAC system. Again, much needed. If you've had a student in the middle school, you can see that was many years in the needing. So just trying to keep up on a lot of our facilities. There's something like the weather coating at the skylight at Parkside that's supposed to be done every 10 to 15 years. That just comes up and that costs $9,000. So there's things out there that we're keeping track of. We're doing our best. And then Emily, if you could put up the next one, that PowerPoint. I just wanted to, this is a very short PowerPoint. The Visitor Bureau reached out to us to do a presentation to their board, and I worked with Mitch, our activities director, on this, put the PowerPoint together, and that's okay. It's on your computer. But it's a nice way to show some of the things. They wanted to look at how do we bring more tournaments to town, and how can we use Marshall Public Schools facilities. And so we put a PowerPoint together. It just outlines what we all did with the middle school gym renovation. One of the things I didn't include was the powered backboards now, which we're very fortunate. 30% of that was covered by organizations that use our facilities. And then just showed pictures of the middle school transition from the old to the new, which is great. And then the high school, just pointing out that obviously we haven't done anything out there for a while since we redid the floor. We did add shot clocks, which they'll be using this fall as part of the Minnesota School High School League, which those were helped out with MGBA and hoops. And then our annual floor maintenance. And then Southview, obviously the addition to that gym was big for some of our organizations, as well as Marshall Public Schools. You know, our dance team goes there to perform or to practice, which now they have their own place. But showed them that, and then also the high school fields, what we're doing out there to make those better. We replaced the one sand-based, which hopefully everybody's seen. Action Landscapes Facebook page. It's really cool to see that transition from the old to the new. We're working hard on the other fields out there, making sure that the irrigation system's working. We're seeding, we're fertilizing, weed control, getting those in better shape. And then the tennis courts will be resurfaced. They're starting that this week. So just a lot of different of our facilities that hopefully we can partner with organizations in the city if they need to use ours. And then like the gymnastics room, going from the pool to the gymnastics area, we've heard a lot of good feedback on that area, and we'll continue to try and improve that. And then partnership with SMSU with our track. That has been great. That's been 10 years now that's been out there, which is incredible. And then our middle school track, just replacing that, which I've seen a lot of people out there now. And then we added the irrigation system in the middle, and we continue to try to make sure that grass area is good for soccer and football also. Then we just pointed out to them some of the future projects, and that's included in the LTFM, but adding shot clocks at the middle school, maybe looking at the main floor bleachers, which is quite expensive, but at some point we'll have to look at that. The middle school theater, which is on our 2024 schedule, that'll be our next one to go through. And then the high school fields, again, continue repairing the irrigation system, and then pipe dream of mine is adding a parking lot out by the softball and baseball and tennis fields. It just makes sense than people trying to drive out there having to walk all that way. But the presentation went over very well. CVB is donating $15,000 to Marshall Public Schools to use as we see fit towards our facilities. So Mitch and I will meet and talk about that a little bit of what's on our agenda, where we can see that. And then they also talked about possibly donating next year. So we really appreciate that partnership as we keep building our community partnerships. But overall, the other attachments show the expenditures and the revenue for the next 10 years for the LTFM. Like we said, you get out 5 years and you start picking and choosing, different things pop up. But the high school roof is on the radar around 26, 27, depending on how well that roof lasts. So it's kind of nice to go through this. We go through, Warren and I work on the list a lot of what we're doing, but when you hit that tenure, you really start to look at some of those projects that go out 4, 5, 6 years, and they keep popping up like parking lots and roofs and everything. But
Thanks, Dion, and thanks to all of our partnerships and collaborations throughout the city. We couldn't do any of this without help from everybody, so
Absolutely.
appreciate that. I'll call for the vote. That is approved. Our next action item is a write-off of the remaining free and reduced food service outstanding balances. I'll need a motion.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Bill Swope and seconded by Sarah Runcie. Any discussion?
yeah, just as pointed out, this is just our free and reduced families. The total balance for free and reduced families has gone down to $484.89, and that's 148 families. So each account is very minimal. But with the free meals coming up starting this fall, and we'll be sending letters out to families about that, we'd like to write off the free and reduced. We continue to send letters out to the paid patrons to settle their accounts so we can get that down as soon as we can, if not to zero before school starts.
Very good. I'll call for the vote. That is approved. Next action item is approval of Superintendent Williams' 2023-2024 performance goals. I'll make a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Any discussion?
I'll share these are my annual goals. Executive committee has told me they're good with these goals. Looking at working on the CTE center, getting that completed, and working on that communication strategy we talked about earlier tonight.
Sounds good. I'll call for the vote. That is approved. Our next action item is a final review and approval of the 2023 legislative changes of all these policies. So there's a lot of policies that got changed. Need a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
This is not a typical policy update where we do the 3 readings and a couple policies we can take a little more time to review and look at. There are a lot of changes here. These are all legislative changes. These are all from MSBA model policies based on changes from the legislative session that recently closed. So the recommendation from MSBA was that we take these and none of the changes here are things we have control over anyway. It's a lot of verbiage things, a lot of the typical verbiage things, but all aligns with new legislation. So the recommendation was that the board takes it and does it in one motion. So these are all fully in place in the district by the time school starts this fall.
Any questions? I'll call for the vote. Those are approved. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.